Margaret Phillips pressed the phone hard against her ear. "I'm telling you," she said, voice tight, "there's a black boy in my yard causing trouble." Red and blue lights cut through the afternoon calm. Sirens tore across Maple Street. In the glow stood 12-year-old Isaiah Brown. He hugged a basketball to his chest. His face was ashen. His hands shook. A handful of neighbors peered from porches. Whispers filled the air. This was the moment it all began. Isaiah had just moved here with his mom. He was polite, bright, loved basketball more than anything. You'd often find him outside practicing layups in his driveway. That afternoon, he'd been perfecting a spin move when his ball bounced free. It rolled across the street and came to rest in the yard next door. Isaiah laughed and followed it over. "Hey, excuse me. That's my ball," he called out at the fence, but no one answered. He looked left. He looked right. No one watched. He took a step into the yard to grab his ball. Simple. What Isaiah didn't know was someone was watching. Margaret stood behind her lace curtains, eyes narrow. To her, it wasn't a kid retrieving a ball. It was suspicious. She frowned. Thoughts raced through her mind. Who is this kid? Why is he in my yard? Without waiting for an explanation, she lifted her phone. "Hello, police? There's a black kid snooping on my property. Send someone right away." Her voice was sharp. By the time Isaiah lifted the ball and turned to leave, he heard the sirens closing fast. He froze. A patrol car screeched to a halt behind him. Two officers stepped out, Officer Reed and Officer Morales, both faces serious. Isaiah's heart thundered. He blinked under the flashing lights. He didn't understand. Why were they here? Officer Reed approached with slow, careful steps. "Son," he said, tone calm but firm, "what are you doing here?" Isaiah squeezed the basketball, voice trembling. I just came for my ball," he whispered. It rolled into the yard. Margaret emerged from her porch, arms crossed. "That's him," she said. "He's been sneaking around all day. I don't care what he says. He doesn't belong in this neighborhood." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Neither looked eager to contradict her. Officer Morales turned back to Isaiah. "Is that true? Were you trespassing?" Isaiah's chest tightened. He looked down at the cracked pavement. "No, sir," he said softly. "I was only getting my ball." Margaret sniffed, voice cutting. "Oh, sure," she snapped. "They always say that. First they want a ball, then they're scouting windows, looking for valuables to steal." Her words hit Isaiah like a punch. His eyes flicked from the officers to the small crowd, then back to Margaret. He opened his mouth to explain, but nothing came out. An awkward hush settled over the street. The neighbors watched through windows. Some peeked around corners. Officer Reed cleared his throat. "Why didn't you stay in your own yard?" he asked. Isaiah blinked up at him, confusion wrinkling his brow. He felt every gaze on him. He searched for a friendly face, but found none. Margaret folded her arms tighter, her face smug. "I told you," she said. "He's been up to something." Isaiah wasn't up to anything. He was just a boy with a basketball. But in that moment, he felt like a criminal. Officer Morales glanced at his partner. The pressure from Margaret was clear. He sighed. "Son," he said gently, "you're going to have to come with us for questioning." Isaiah didn't struggle. He didn't argue. His voice shook as he managed one request. "Can I call my mom?" Officer Reed glanced at Officer Morales, then nodded. He stepped back. Isaiah pulled his phone from his pocket, fingers trembling as he dialed. Meanwhile, in a sleek office downtown, phones were mid-ring. Governor Renee Brown sat surrounded by advisors. When her assistant handed her the call, she answered without hesitation. "Mom?" Isaiah's voice cracked. "They've stopped me. They think I was trespassing." Renee's heart tightened. "Stay put," she said. She hung up and made two more calls, first to her chief of staff, then to her driver detail. Back on Maple Street, Margaret Phillips still stood on her porch, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face. She had no idea what was coming. A distant roar grew. Sirens joined the sound of thunderous engines. Not one SUV, not two. An entire convoy thundered down the street, sleek black vehicles, lights flashing, engines roaring. Margaret's smirk faded. Confusion flickered across her face. She stepped back as the convoy screeched to a halt. Doors swung open. Suited agents poured out, and from the lead SUV emerged Governor Renee Brown. She didn't rush. She didn't shout. She simply walked forward. Her presence alone silenced the block. Neighbors froze. Officers straightened. Have you ever felt power shift in an instant? Isaiah looked up, wide-eyed, as his mom placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Margaret's jaw dropped. She thought this was a simple trespass. She never guessed whom she'd called the cops on. If you're enjoying this story, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel for more. Governor Brown paused in front of Officer Reed. Her gaze swept the officers, the onlookers, then landed on Margaret. Her tone was calm but sharp, like a blade cutting through tension. "What exactly is happening here?" she asked. Officer Reed cleared his throat. "Governor Brown, ma'am, we received a report of suspicious activity. A young man was seen on private property." Renee raised an eyebrow and looked at Margaret. "And you made this report?" Margaret swallowed, eyes still locked on the governor. She nodded, voice barely audible. "Yes, I saw him in my yard. I didn't know who he was or what he was doing. I thought it was right to call the police." Renee stood silent, letting the quiet stretch. Her eyes never left Margaret's. Then she turned back to Officer Morales. "This is Isaiah Brown, my son," she said, voice steady. "What evidence do you have that he was doing anything suspicious?" The officers glanced at each other, uncomfortable. None could point to anything but a basketball in his hands. Governor Brown's gaze softened as she gave Isaiah a small, reassuring nod. Then she looked Margaret in the eye, her next words spoken deliberately, every listener leaning in to hear. Governor Renee Brown's voice was calm as she stepped closer to Margaret. "So let me get this straight," she said slowly. "A 12-year-old boy retrieves a basketball, and your first instinct is to call the police?" Margaret's hands clenched into fists. "I didn't know who he was," she sputtered defensively. "He could have been anyone, and kids like him don't just wander into yards without a reason." Renee's expression didn't change. Then her tone dropped lower, sharper. "Kids like him?" she repeated. "What exactly does that mean?" A heavy silence fell. Neighbors glanced at each other, uneasy under that question. Margaret's earlier confidence evaporated. Renee took another step forward, her voice quiet but commanding. "Let me be very clear," she said. "You called the police on a child. You accused him without any evidence, and now you're justifying it with assumptions that say far more about you than about him. You should be arrested." The crowd stood in stunned silence, absorbing her words. Click the subscribe button if you believe justice should never depend on the color of your skin. Renee turned to the officers. "I want this resolved," she said firmly, "and I want it done the right way. My son deserves better than this." They nodded quickly, professionalism snapping back. Margaret, shoulders slumped, managed, "I'm sorry, Governor Brown." Renee faced both her and the officers, voice steady and deliberate. "This isn't just about my son," she said. "This is about every child who's been made to feel like they don't belong. Every parent who wonders if their child will make it home safely." The gathering watched in silence. For some, it was a mirror held up to their own biases. For others, a reminder of work still to be done. Then Renee addressed the crowd not as a politician, but as a mother. She spoke of fear, prejudice, and the importance of seeing each other as human first. We all have a responsibility to ourselves, to our neighbors, to the children who will inherit this world. Let's make it one where they feel safe, where they feel valued. Renee turned back to Margaret one last time. Her voice was calm, but her words carried the weight of a promise. "Think carefully before you make assumptions like this again, because next time, it won't end here." Margaret's bravado was gone. Shame lingered in every glance her neighbors gave her. In the weeks that followed, Governor Brown reached out to the local community association. She proposed a series of workshops on bias, inclusion, and accountability. Isaiah, encouraged by his mother, spoke at his school assembly. "I didn't understand why someone would think I was bad just because of the way I look," he said. "But now I know. We have to stand up to that. We have to be better." What began as a single incident, a basketball rolling into the wrong yard, became a moment of reckoning for an entire community. Margaret Phillips learned a painful lesson about the consequences of her actions, one that stayed with her long after the sirens and whispers faded. And Governor Renee Brown continued to fight, not just as a governor, but as a mother, a neighbor, and a voice for those often unheard. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about one boy, one woman, or one neighborhood. It was a story about the power of truth, the courage to confront our assumptions, and the hope that together we can create a world where everyone truly belongs. Don't forget to subscribe to join our Story Arc Tribe community, where we share living stories that matter.